Hey, it's your boy BT, Brendan Taylor. You're watching 5th Street Gym on South Beach. You're watching True School Sports.
Alright, Brendan Taylor here, True School Sports. I'm with Luis Monda. How you doing, Luis?
Good.
It's good to be back at Johnny Toccos gym. We were just talking about, you know, I guess when you punch, you're supposed to stab people, and you would give me a whole breakdown on that. Can you tell people about that?
Sure. The bare knuckle fighters fought a lot longer and with less hand protection than we fight now. And I think this is one of the things that's been lost through generations of boxing due to the invention of bigger gloves and more development in terms of how trainers wrap hands. So they don't actually teach you how to form a fist in a way that'll prevent hand injury and at the same time maximize damage to the opponent. So the way I teach my students is they roll the pinky and ring finger in the tightest, and then the top two knuckles kind of stick out. So if they touch their hand to a flat surface, the smaller two knuckles are back further. You know, and like then when you go to punch, you kind of tuck your wrist a little, so that when you punch, the first two knuckles come out first and line up with the forearm. The back two knuckles are back further, so that actually protects these two knuckles. They don't impact the target, because the smaller, weaker knuckles tend to snap easier. I know a lot of people who've done martial arts and box. Most hand breaks occur or either wrist or the back two knuckles tend to shatter or break or get pushed back. I knew a karate guy who hit a wall and these two knuckles went all the way to his wrist.
Oh.
So like he had to have two pins go from his elbow all the way out to re-straighten the bones. We don't want that kind of thing to happen. But also the other thing that happens is when you punch that way, and karate is one of the last arts that I know of that still teaches, you know, to pronate the wrist and the hand and aim one knuckle at a time, at the most two. But what happens is you concentrate the force. Instead of spreading the force across the whole fist and coming in block square like that, you concentrate it to just one point. So instead of a hit, the opponent will feel a stab. You know, the one knuckle is a lot smaller, and it'll push into the body. For horizontal fist punches, vertical fist punches, horizontal is this way. Vertical fist punches, we tend to aim the backside of the middle finger knuckle. So again, you're driving knuckle first. You don't want to hit here or here. This is a slap. You know, this part of the hand doesn't hurt that much. So you aim just the one knuckle, try to get that on the opponent's bone or on their body. Uppercuts, it's the same target. It's right there. And that's when I touched you earlier.
Yeah.
With the Mike McCallum would do that to me. He would come to me all the time in the gym and just kind of drive his knuckle up into my body as like a greeting, and it always hurt really bad. And I never caught on to it. After like 2 years of being with them, finally I was like, what the hell are you doing? Like, I don't understand why your hand feels like that. But I saw he had his hand like this and he was poking me with that right there. You just drive that into me really hard. So you get a penetrating, instead of the force stopping and dissipating at the point of impact, you get a penetration. It goes into the opponent, does more damage. You're also more prone to shatter a bone. You know, it's concentrating, it's like a hammer. All the force is concentrated into one little point. So, plus, if you break a knuckle, it's just one, you know, instead of
the back two.
All of them. Yeah. So it's just better, more efficient, less damage. And if you look at pictures of old school fighters, they're all like this. If you look at their hands, they have them in that formation.
Yeah.
When they punch, they just, you know, they grip, they squeeze with the bottom two knuckles, top two stay loose, and they turn the punch over, and it creates a kind of stabbing effect.
Yeah, I mean, because you barely touched me, and I felt the power of it.
Yeah. I mean, it's what effectively turns your hand into a weapon. It's like, I might as well have poked you with like a metal rod.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It feels the same.
Okay.
This is Showtime Sean Porter.
This is Aerosmith Jr.
Hey everyone, this is Jesse Vargas.
And you're watching True School Sports.
You're watching True School Sports.
And you're watching True School Sports.
Stay tuned.
I mean, it feels the same.
Okay. One other thing we talked about was, because I went on a little rant about it on Facebook about Virgil Hunter and.
Yeah, you're not shy about how you feel about Virgil.
No, definitely not. You made some great points about how certain trainers are able to refine fighters and some aren't. Could you talk about that a little bit, like how it got?
Yeah, I mean, teaching is not a thing that people can just do, and one of the things in boxing is that it's so easy to become an instructor. I mean, people would even say that about me. They'd say he didn't really do anything, you know, like, because I don't have a lot of accolades in the sport for myself personally. But at the same time, there have been plenty of world level fighters, former Olympic gold medalists, who were garbage as trainers. Like, I mean, they were just not good.
Yeah, Pernell Whitaker couldn't train.
Right. So teaching is not an easy thing to do. You can either do it or you can't, or you have to learn how. You know, like we were discussing last time, when Georgie Benton wanted to become a trainer, he followed Eddie Futch around. You know, he was his assistant. Freddie Roach, the same thing. Freddie Roach had to carry spit buckets for a period of time. I did the same thing. I followed these guys around for 2 years, looked, learned, you know, like learn my place, and then start to form my own identity. If you don't go through that apprenticeship process, then typically you end up with one niche, like one thing you can do well. Most trainers fall into a couple different categories. One of them being that you have guys who are really good at building a guy. Like they can take a kid who's 5 years old and turn him into like a world level amateur. They can raise them from the time they're little kids and get them all the way to the world level as amateurs, or even to the Olympic level. And then even they can even take them to pros and take them to high levels in the pros. But that guy may never have another fighter of that quality ever in his life ever again.
Yeah.
Unless he goes through that exact same process. Other trainers, like the Angelo Dundees of the world, they can take a fully refined fighter and teach them some tricks, corner them very well, establish a bond with them, and take them to the next level as pros, but they didn't build them. They didn't build them from the ground up. They didn't teach them how to fight. And you can't find a fighter of theirs that they built from the ground up, that they taught how to fight. It's very rare that you get a trainer that can do both, that can take a veteran fighter and make them better, and at the same time build a fighter from damn near nothing. You know what I mean? I'm striving for that just because that's my goal, is to be a guy who can do that. I don't give a shit about the accolades or who thinks what of me. I just want to know that I can do that. You know, I want to know that I can fix a car, and at the same time I want to know that I can build a car from scratch. Like, I want to be able to do both.
Yeah.
That's just my personal
Perfect your craft.
Right. Virgil, I mean, you cannot take Andre Ward away from him. You can't. You can't do it. Like, try as you might to say he's not that good of a trainer, he built one of the best guys in the sport right this second. And he built him from the ground up. But to me, when I saw him with Amir Khan, and when I saw him with, I think he had Angulo for a little while, and then when I saw him with Andre Berto, it struck me like, these guys, it's not necessarily Virgil, like, because I really don't like the dissension in boxing. I don't like the way we treat each other as trainers, because like, too many people will say this guy ain't shit or that guy ain't shit.
Yeah, this guy can't train,
right.
that guy can't train.
I do my best. I do my best not to do that. So I don't necessarily think it's Virgil. Virgil has his way. He has his way that he does his thing. It's that when you take a veteran fighter who already has habits you don't like, it's incredibly difficult to assimilate them into your process without fully breaking them down. So if you're going to try to preserve what they've already done, and at the same time indoctrinate them into your system, that's one of the hardest things to do. And it just doesn't gel that well. Like, it doesn't gel that well. It didn't gel that well for Khan, Angulo, Berto, or Fanfara. Yeah. So, but that I don't think that should necessarily be used as a slight on Virgil, other than that you got to recognize when that's happening, and you have to be able to say, okay, if I'm going to get a veteran fighter who already thinks they know how to fight, even if I think they don't, they think they do, I have to have a process by which I'm going to break them down or polish them, maybe in a way that they're not even aware of it, or maybe in a way where you grab them by the face and say, you really don't know how to fight all that good. And what I'm going to do is give you all the shit that you're missing. So be quiet. You called me. Be quiet. Listen to me. Do what I say or leave. Because Mike McCallum told me that that's the way Eddie Futch always was. You know, Futch was always, if you said one thing to Eddie about, well, my way is blah, blah, Eddie would grab his bag and leave the gym.
Dang.
And then you'd call him up and say, Eddie, why would you leave the gym? He'd like, look, man, I don't have time for that.
Yeah,
you're not going to tell me how to tell you how to fight. You called me. If you don't want to hear what I have to say, then I'm just going to stay home. But
there's no point.
Right. And he had already made his money too, so he wasn't that guy who, you know, he was trying not to get fired, and he didn't care. Like, his integrity was more important to him by that point. It's hard for us to be like that off the bat because a lot of us don't have, you know, multi-million-dollar fighters. I don't have any multi-million-dollar fighters.
Yeah.
And when you get that, people always got to remember that a trainer's making a tenth of what the fighter makes, like 1/10 typically. Unless a fighter is particularly generous and gives a trainer maybe 20-25%, but that's rare.
Well, they buy him a car.
Right.
Like
Or they buy him a car. Right.
Anthony Joshua did that.
So we have to. If I'm gonna make $1 million, and I have $1 million fighter, I need 10 of him to make that same million he does, because I'm only making 100 grand. So our attentions can get divided, and it's hard for us to dive into a guy in the same way. You know, like Ward might be getting things the other guys aren't. I don't know. Or he might be around them, or he just understands Virgil better. But when you know that there's a rift between you and the fighter, you have to be able to recognize it and then do what it takes to either cover it or just let him go. Like I said before, Bobby Pacquiao. Bobby Pacquiao was a good fighter. Like, a lot of people don't remember that, don't want to remember that. Like, why should they? You know, his brother was Manny.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, somebody should have told Bobby, leave Manny alone and leave California. Go to New York or Philly or somewhere like that. If you really want that, I don't know what was going on in Bobby's head. I don't know what he wanted out of boxing. But if he wanted to be on the same level Manny was, he needed to go do his thing somewhere else.
Just be himself, have the
And be
individuality.
himself, and have a trainer who wanted to maximize his talents, because he didn't hit like Manny, but he boxed more smoothly, I felt, in his prime. So he needed a trainer who would bring that up. The Marquez brothers did that. The Marquez brothers stopped training in the same gym for that reason, because they knew that Rafa would always end up in Juan Manuel's shadow. So while that kind of still happened in a way, you can't deny what Rafa accomplished. You know, he was a 2 or 3 division champion.
He had a good career.
Yeah. So I just think that it doesn't. There are trainers who have their thing, and it's difficult. It's especially difficult to take veteran fighters and put them in a thing that's already established.
Yeah. It's a good point. You know, Virgil has Ward, and you know, one thing too is like the personalities. A lot of times, it's hard to like training guys the same way because of the personalities. Different guys don't always process information the same.
Yeah, I mean, like, all my fighters, they're all different. You know, like, some of them complain more than other ones. Some of them come talk to me. Some of them I gotta go talk to them. And that's the thing, is each guy's individual. So you can have a program. The Russians and Cubans, they built their amateur systems on a program. So everyone comes out of there learning how to fight. But when you want to bring the best out of each individual guy, you gotta know them.
Yeah.
You gotta know them as well as they know themselves, sometimes better. Because you gotta, the main thing with trainers is you gotta be able to call fighters out on their bullshit. You know, you gotta be able to say, hey, no, this isn't your way of doing things. You're just lazy, you know, or you want to avoid this thing, so you're trying to do that instead. Like, it's our job as trainers to call that out when we see it in a fighter. You know, like we were discussing earlier with one of my fighters, Chavez and Nacho, and the stuff Chavez Jr. said about Nacho after the fight, and it didn't make sense to people. They're like, wait a minute, why are you talking about how he don't fit with you, but you kept him the whole camp, and here he is. And when I saw that fight, what I saw was Nacho preventing that fight from ending as messily as it could have.
Yeah.
Because what Chavez wanted to do was march into everything Canelo was going to throw at him. You know, and sure, he might consider that the honorable way to go, in his opinion, or he might feel better about that, or he might feel like even that's his identity as a fighter. But I don't know if he would have lasted the whole fight doing what he wanted. So Nacho was just doing his job. Like, he was just doing the job he was there to do.
Yeah. And credit to him that he went the full 12 rounds.
Right, exactly.
Hey guys, Christina Poncher here, and you're watching True School Sports.
Yeah. Last question I wanted to ask you was, we were talking about Ward Kovalev because that fight's this week, and you were talking about Ward and you know how he pretty much how you feel he has Kovalev figured out and he made the adjustment. Can you talk about that?
I think he's got the significant advantage. I mean, if I was going to favor somebody in that fight, I would favor Ward, because Ward is the one who, the first thing in his head after the first fight is going to be, what do I need to do different to have a better performance in the second fight. Whereas Kovalev is like, how much harder do I need to go at him?
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, that's kind of a cyborg mentality. And I'll be the first to tell you that cyborg-like fighters were always my favorite kind of fighters, because I have immense respect for a guy who, even if he's limited, he can do that limited thing for like 3 hours. You know, like they're the guys who can fight 15 rounds, and they're more dangerous in the 13th, 14th, and 15th than they were in the whole fight.
Yeah.
Which that makes me nostalgic about the kind of boxing I saw coming up as a kid. But nowadays, when you have less time to win the fight, you have to establish dominance
Earlier
and maintain it all the way through to the 12th round. You can't go into a second fight with a guy like Andre Ward thinking that all you got to do is show up, like, or hire a conditioning coach, and that's what's going to be different. Is that you're going to do more push-ups and sit-ups, you know, and jump on the roof of cars and back off again, and throw weights up in the air. That's not going to beat Andre Ward. What's going to beat Andre Ward is preventing him from doing what he wants, you know, and he's the type of dude who just hitting him hard isn't going to do that. I think he proved that in the first fight, that he battled back, he gained control of the fight. So why are you going to go into a second fight thinking all you got to do is repeat what you did in the first one, just faster and harder?
Yeah.
You know, like, unless there's somebody there in the Kovalev camp who truly said, no, we got to do different, we got to do something different this fight. But the odds on that are not very good. You know, like the odds on that are, because I don't know that anybody in Kovalev's camp is, again, calling him out on that, is being honest with him, is saying, hey, you lost control of that fight because you gave him tactical advantages. You know, you gave him, he employed a different strategy and we didn't adapt.
Yeah, and he got on the inside and made him uncomfortable.
Exactly. So now we need to adapt. Now we need to do something different. When he tries to do this again, or when he comes up with a different plan, we got to know what to do. You're not just going to go in there. The plan can't be hit him hard.
Yeah.
That plan failed once. Well, to some people, you know, a lot of people scored that fight for Kovalev, which is fair, but you're not gonna do that a second time in that exact same fashion.
Yeah. So you got Ward winning the fight.
Yeah, I favor Ward probably like 60-40.
Okay. All right. Any message to people out there about Johnny Toccos?
I mean, you know, of course, the Toccos family, all my fighters, you know, who put in all the work, all you media guys who, you know, keep asking me questions and stuff like that. I mean, I'm a fairly young, you know, wet behind the ears trainer, as people would say. So any opportunity to express myself is always good.
Yeah. All right, Luis Monda, thank you for talking to True School Sports today.
Yeah, no problem.